for the delay, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started soon. We're still waiting on one of our panelists, but we're just going to go ahead and we can loop her in when she gets here. So welcome everyone to a very special Alumni Founders Series today. My name is Savannah. For those of you who don't know me, I'm the Outreach Fellow here at the Entrepreneurship Center. And I thank you all so much for being here today. Again, sorry for the delay. And I'm super excited to introduce all of you to our amazing alumni founders in just a few minutes. But first, I want to thank the Feliciano Center at Montclair State University for organizing this nationwide Women in Entrepreneurship Week event series, as well as to William & Mary's Finance Academy for co-sponsoring this event with the EC. For those of you who are unfamiliar with Finance Academy, it's open to all majors, but it helps students learn more about careers in finance. And so they have events centered around that. And they also have events typically on Thursdays. So I believe Katie is here, who's the president of Finance Academy, Katie English. And so you can message her or reach out to her if you have any questions about that. And then I also just wanted to give a rundown of tonight's format for those of you who are unfamiliar with Alumni Founder Series. But we'll begin with introductions of our guests, and then we'll dive into a brief interview led by me. And then normally after that, we head into an audience question and answer. And today that's going to look a little bit different. Today, I'd like to ask that if you have a question that you send it to me in the chat, and then when we get to the Q&A, I can call upon you to ask the question that you sent me, so that throughout the event, if you have a question, just message it to me so I can get you in the queue, and we can make sure that we get through as many questions as possible today. And then also our questions today from me will be largely based on the Miller Center's pillars of entrepreneurial thinking. And we use these as central to our ideas for everything that we do at the Entrepreneurship Center, because we believe that they are essential in developing the skills and the mindset of an entrepreneur. And so I'm going to place those in the chat momentarily just so that they can be referred to if needed for our audience, and also so that you can visualize them as well as hear about our panelists' application of those. So with that being said, I'm super excited to introduce our panelists to all of you today. And to start, we are joined by Jennifer Kiryakakis. I believe I pronounced your name correctly. If not, please correct me. But she's the founder and VP of marketing at Matrix Software. So Jennifer, thank you so much for joining us. Would you like to get us started by telling us a little bit about yourself and what you're doing at Matrix Software currently?
Absolutely. So it's really good to be here with all of you. Sorry, my phone is ringing. Turn that off. Yeah, so I graduated from William & Mary in 1996, so class of 96, and I've been working in the same field ever since, telecommunications. But in about 2008, I left a very cushy job at Oracle to go start a company, kind of a disruptor challenger in the telecommunications space. So Matrix does enterprise, we create enterprise software for telcos like AT&T, Verizon, et cetera. So when you think about that globally, so in every single country around the world, there's like 5 or 6 telco companies like Verizon or AT&T. So we have about 350 employees now, all around the world. We've got people across 25 different countries, customers across 30 different countries. So it started with 5 engineers in a 1-bedroom apartment, and now we are a global enterprise software company.
Awesome. So then our next panelist is Kimton Courier, who is currently the Senior Director of Engagement at the Flow Corporation. So thank you for joining us, Kimton. Would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself as well as what you're up to currently at the Flow Corporation?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me. My name's Kimton Courier. I'm a Senior Director of Engagement at Flow Corp. I graduated from the MBA program in 2017. It's nice to, I see Graham in there. Hi, Professor Henshaw. He was basically my manager during my I called him my manager during my second year for Graham. And for the past for the past 25 years, I have either worked with or for entrepreneurs in entrepreneurial endeavors. Sometimes that looks like entrepreneurship. And currently, MBA 2017, and then currently I'm employee number 3 at Flow Corp. And so 2 years ago, I heard about this concept and of this, pharmaceutical manufacturer doing a new type of pharmaceutical manufacturing in the United States. And it became real. And so I joined as employee number 3. Everything kind of blew, has grown tremendously. And we won a $354 million government contract. And we've built our team. I think we just hired our 47th person. So it's been a rocket ship ride.
Great, that's awesome to hear. And now we are joined by our third and final panelist, Pocket Sun, who is the founder of SoGal Ventures. So thank you for joining us, Pocket. It's nice to see you here. Would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself and what you're up to at SoGal currently?
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me. So I am the founder of SoGal Ventures. We are an early stage venture capital firm investing in women and underrepresented founders. So we invest in the future of living, working, and staying healthy, and really focusing on how the younger generation and how women and the rest of us get to redefine the world that we live in. So in 2017, we launched our first fund, which was $15 million. And we have deployed that capital into 42 companies around the world. And over 90% of them are founded and co-founded by women or led by a female CEO. And this month, we are actually really scaling our, scaling our fund into the next vehicle, which is a $100 million fund. We're calling it the SoGal Supernova Fund. So we're really getting into the next phase of leading investments in that early stage to become the first check for women entrepreneurs who are creating meaningful change for the world.
Awesome. So to get us started with our questions, now that the audience is acquainted with what each of you are doing, would each of you be willing to kind of discuss your founding story briefly in terms of what the problem was or the opportunity was that you saw? Because opportunity discovery is one of our pillars of entrepreneurial thinking. So maybe we'll start with Jennifer and then go to Pocket and then Kimton.
Sure. So I was always a bit of a gadget person, and I had been in the wireless industry since I graduated, really. And in 1999, I was working at an operator in Mexico City when they rolled out the first. They rolled out back then, before you guys' time. It was called 2.5G, which was the first time you could use a cell phone to get onto the internet. And I was so excited about it. I bought one. I bought one of the very first models, and I had it, and it sucked, basically. And I think for the next 7 years, that experience essentially was bad, right? You had cell phones, you could get on the internet, but you couldn't do anything with them, right? You could, you had to tap the number 3 times to get to the right letter. You couldn't really surf the web. The Blackberries worked good for email, but really there was no user experience. So when the iPhone came out, when that first commercial hit the TV, and it was 2007, I literally jumped out of my chair and started screaming, oh my God, if it really does that. The very first commercial, they turned it sideways. Nobody had ever seen this before, and started swiping through apps and opening up apps. And I freaked out. And I said, if it really does that, then that changes the whole business I'm in. Because right now, at that point in time, the operator revenue was 90% voice. People used phones still to make voice calls 90% of the time. It was 10% of this stuff was texting and being on the internet. And I realized that was going to change. And so I knew some very smart engineers at Oracle who had some good ideas about how to build new technology, and so decided that was the time. Guys, we got to go do this now, because this is going to be big.
Amazing. That's definitely an example of opportunity discovery. Pocket, would you like to share more about what opportunity you saw?
Yeah, so I started SoGal when I was still at grad school. So I went to USC for grad school, and I studied entrepreneurship and innovation. So it was really the first time that I got exposure into the world of entrepreneurship, and it really stunned me. I was like, wow, this is such a great way to create an impact, even though I had no idea what entrepreneurship was all about. And now I'm all about it. My whole career path and how I envisioned who I want to be in the future completely changed after I got exposed to the world of entrepreneurship. So as I was obsessed with, startups and venture. I wanted to learn more about it. I sadly very quickly realized that I was always want to be with only women wherever I went, to a startup event, a pitch festival, or a tech conference. And honestly, like graduating from William and Mary, right? Like I had no issue with that in the past. I didn't feel like, women were the minority. But there I was, being kind of isolated and feeling that I didn't belong. That was what drove me to create the first, I guess, prototype of SoGal, which was an on-campus network and community for women entrepreneurs or entrepreneur wannabes to get together. And very quickly, we were growing from classroom events to big summits that attracted people from like other states to come. And then I realized that all of these women in my network needed capital to grow their businesses. And that kind of put me in this position of thinking, okay, if I really want to serve my community, I need to somewhat bring them capital. And I had no idea how that was going to happen. So then I studied venture capital. I took classes. I went to Stanford for this program about venture capital and met my business partner there. And we had this similar ideas of how the venture capital industry should really change and to reflect how diverse entrepreneurs are, because at the time, like less than 10% of venture capital investors were women. And as a result, even today, like only 2.2% of venture capital money goes to women. And this creates serious consequences because as a venture capital investor, you kind of dictate what the future looks like by investing capital into your version of the most promising startups that you see. So if only men get to make that choice, like imagine how the future will look like, right? So that was what drove me to start my own fund and to find vision aligned people to be on this journey with us and invest in a better future with us.
Great, thank you. Kipton?
Wow, it's so nice to be with Jennifer and Pocket and learn about them too. So I started off my career in real estate, and then about a decade ago, I made the transition to healthcare, but the form of healthcare that I specialize in is population health and also social determinants of health. And there are a lot of different ways that you can approach it. 2 years ago, Dr. Eric Edwards and Dr. Frank Gupton introduced me to this concept of active pharmaceutical ingredients, API. So for an example, Advil has a API, an active pharmaceutical ingredient of ibuprofen. And what's happened over the past 2 decades in the United States is we've outsourced 85% of our API production, meaning if, we have major supply chain issues, if we enter a pandemic, if there's a war or natural disaster, we could get cut off from our life-saving essential medications. For example, we could have all of our blood pressure medicine cut off and a lot of people would get really, really sick and potentially die. And so, when I started learning about the concept, I've always wanted increasing levels of impact with my work. And I was launching a national guarantee bank for affordable housing, climate, and small business, and thought, this is the perfect kind of next jump. Sign me up. I'm ready. And so I was able to join on day one with them, and it's just been a pleasure. So I tend to like the launching of ideas and help really, I help entrepreneurs launch ideas oftentimes, if it's not my own idea.
Great, that really moves us into our next question, which is focused on self-direction, which we hold as a pillar of entrepreneurial thinking because we define it as a bias towards action. And each of you are talking about these opportunities, but it's also it's one thing to think about those opportunities and it's another to act on them, which you all have talked about in your stories. So thinking connected to Women in Entrepreneurship Week, thinking back to the beginning, being a little girl or even a young woman in college at William and Mary, or even starting in the professional world, how did you see the entrepreneurial side of yourself in action through self-direction? Maybe we'll go in the reverse order this time. So Kipton, if you'd like to go first.
So I'm fortunate to be a fourth generation entrepreneur. A lot of us are, descended from entrepreneurs because there weren't corporations, there weren't places to go work. So a lot of us had to make a living. My family just never made it into the corporate world. And so from a very, very small child, these are kind of, gosh, the wanting to go into action is just kind of, it's something I have to actually watch, because I go into action too quickly sometimes, and I need to step back and take some time to think about things. But, when I would say I had my first marketing plan in business when I was about 12 years old. I took my Red Cross babysitting course and knew I could babysit. And so I had my I wrote a letter to to people in the neighborhood. And when someone new would move into the neighborhood, I'd bake them cookies. I'd go with my letter. I would have references. And I had a really successful babysitting business for about a decade. But, I am always thinking of ideas, and, lean startup. I'm sure that y'all are still probably reading that, a minimum viable product. I always have a notebook of ideas. I was just texting before I got on the call. I was like, I've been very interested in veterinarian labs recently. I'm always just kind of playing around. I have a list of 10 ideas that I'm kind of always researching and working on. And so, the action is, it's what's the minimum viable product? Where can you launch? And I don't know. I skew towards action a little too much. That's a great question, though. Thank you.
Pocket, would you like to? Yeah.
So I never considered myself as an entrepreneur when I was growing up. I guess coming to William & Mary as an international student was my first entrepreneurial attempt, because I think, to me, the spirit of entrepreneurship is all about jumping into the ocean without knowing how to swim, and learning to swim while you're swimming. So coming to William & Mary was definitely one of those experiences that helped me build character, I guess. So William & Mary wasn't so in my year there were 10 Chinese students. So I was pretty much into this brand new environment. I had never been to the US before. I had no family members who had ever been to the US. So it was completely a blank date for me. So throwing myself into the new culture, new language environment, trying to make sense of the new academic life, and really taking my reading and writing and speaking to the next level, that was all very challenging. And I think from then on, I have always been someone who likes to explore. I like connecting with people. I like exploring new opportunities. So I do feel like being able to act even in tiny baby steps on an idea that you have is a great action to take. So when I was a student of entrepreneurship, we were told that there are many ideas floating in the air around the world, and once you have this idea, it's yours for a very short period of time. And once you don't act on it, this idea kind of flies away and goes to someone else. So it's all about who takes the action and seizes the opportunity. But of course, there are so many opportunities out there. So you have to think about, what is something that you can work on for a very long time and you wouldn't be tired of, and what is something, I guess, how to bridge the gap between, a seemingly big idea versus something you can do today. So I really see entrepreneurship as a platform or a mindset where you dare to take some first steps and see where it goes, and quickly reiterate based on that. And before you know it, you will get to a destination that you never imagined of.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really great perspective. Thank you. Jennifer?
Awesome. Yeah, there's a lot of similarities. It's funny. I mean, the independence thing, I think, is because I never really considered myself either as a child at all an entrepreneur, but I was very independent, and I did the babysitting thing. From the time I was 12 years old, I wanted to have my own money, right? And I always had a job. I worked all the way through college. I just always wanted that independence. In various different ways, right? I wasn't necessarily afraid to go my own way if that was the way that I wanted to go. I also did a lot better in situations like Pocket was saying, you know, if somebody gave me a very structured kind of assignment or class assignment either, I mean, I did okay, but when somebody gave me something much less structured, that's where I just was able to have a lot more fun with it. And that's in those kinds of situations where someone just throws you into something and says, figure it out. Like that's, to me, that's fun. Figuring it out, it doesn't stress me out. So I think there's a lot of that, you know, drive to, ooh, I can figure it out. And while I'm figuring out, I get to put my own stamp on it. And that drives a lot of that entrepreneurial type of feeling. I think also the team building aspect of it, right? Like that's a big thing. And when I was, you know, just some of the activities I did when I was younger around dance team and stuff like that. I mean, it sounds silly, but you do kind of get to build the team that you want and then take the team to the competition and then win the competition. So there's a lot of those types of similarities too. That's one of the things that I enjoy most, is just building that team and then watching that team thrive.
Yeah, absolutely. Collaboration is another one of our pillars of entrepreneurial thinking, and I feel like I've seen that in all of your stories so far. But also, being a woman in the business world undoubtedly has its challenges, as each of you have also touched on. And that requires grit, which we define simply as persistence in the face of challenges, which is just entrepreneurial in general. And so what has been the toughest problem that each of you have had to face, and how did you kind of begin to approach those problems, especially when they're really large or sometimes even systematic when it comes to being a woman in entrepreneurship? So Pocket, do you want to start this one?
Yeah, I think before this year, my biggest hurdle was definitely fundraising. So as a 20-something-year-old, it was really difficult to convince people to give us their hard-earned money to manage, to investing something that seems really risky. So it actually took us almost 4 years to raise the first $15 million to invest in women entrepreneurs. But I think in the process, I just learned so much. And the overall environment of fundraising is not in women's favor. Like, for example, only 1.1% of all alternative assets are managed by women, majority women-owned or diverse people-owned firms. So that is a really, really, really tiny percentage if you really think about it. So we were really going against the grains there. But I feel that at the end, it's all about tenacity, and it's really about going door to door, taking tons of meetings and building a brand, and building your inward and outward communications and branding and marketing, so that people, if they're interested in like investing in women, for example, they will know where to find you. And so, yeah, I think also dealing with my own mindset roadblock around money was a big lesson for me. I think growing up as a woman, like, you are not told to, you know, like, you should create generational wealth, like you will be a billionaire one day. Like, although I don't encourage billionaires to exist, but like, women are kind of lacking this courage or conviction about money. Like, we are constantly told to, you know, save here and there, but not to invest, and not to invest in yourself, and not to, you know, be the master of wealth. So and even when women get rich, a lot of them donate their money to charities, they do philanthropy, but a lot of women are still not in the like behind the driver's wheel for investment decisions for the household. So yeah, so I feel like conquering that and overcoming my own like mental roadblocks around money and about, you know, success, and about how to be myself and still stand out and still fit in, and still break the status quo, like all these conflicting things, how to balance them all and stay true to who you are, why you're doing this. I think
that whole journey was really rewarding. And having a coach was really helpful for me. Some people have therapists, some people have coaches. Like, I think coaches really helped my inner growth, which became just so important. And I feel like as an entrepreneur, you have to sort all your issues when you're with your upbringing, and the patterns that weaken you, or the limiting beliefs that you have that you might not know about. Like, I think these things are actually the hardest.
Great, thank you. Jennifer, would you like to answer this one next?
Sure. Just honestly, especially early in my career, when I was first starting out, I mean, there's kind of a cycle of being, how do you say, underestimated, right? Like a constant cycle of people, older managers just kind of underestimating your ability. And so I went through several cycles on that. And you basically, it's a negative, but it can be turned into a positive, right? Because once you kind of prove yourself, you've double impressed the person, despite their unconscious bias. And so, I had several situations where I had we actually worked for the client when I was managing a project, and I was like 25 years old. And he told me the day he met me, he was like, "This is why the project's failing. You have a 25-year-old woman running it." Like, he literally said that. And 6 months later, he recruited me onto his team. So, there's that constant kind of cycle of having to prove yourself, I think, more as a woman, especially when you're younger, where that gets really tricky, and things I haven't figured out yet is when you're working with somebody on a day-to-day basis, or even just on a regular basis, you can combat that and you can work through that. When you're doing things like trying to raise money, or when you have a board who only sees you 4 or 5 times a year, that's a much harder barrier to get over. And so you have to, I seek advice on that all the time, and mentorship on that all the time. Because a lot of times when you walk in the room as a woman, you've got 3 partners at a VC firm, who just don't really, they can't help it. They have this unconscious bias towards you. How can you kind of shift that within a 45-minute to 1 hour meeting? And there's no magic answer, but I think that's one of the things that we continually face.
Wow, yeah, that's a really great perspective and a really interesting story for sure. Kimton, would you like to add to this?
Yeah, those are great points, Pocket and Jennifer. And I kind of want to know what the magic solution is for unconscious bias. Please. It's,
you have to be 10 times better prepared than they expect you to be. That's the only way to do it. You have to be 10 times more prepared.
And even that sometimes isn't enough. And that's okay too. It's, it's been so my name is actually Kimton because it's non-gender specific, and my sister's name is Austin, and my parents really wanted us to have, neutral names for business purposes. They didn't, see the internet coming where someone could just Google you. So I was raised in, a family that never told me I couldn't do something because I was a woman. And so this whole thing was kind of a shock to me. And I also, New York City real estate, I never felt held back by being a woman in business. And so it's more recent for me. And I think the biggest lesson and the most important thing I could possibly say tonight for women in entrepreneurship, and I'm still working on it, and Pocket alluded to it when she was talking about working with her coach. It's know who you are. And if you don't know who you are, someone's going to tell you who you are, and you might believe them, and it's not true. And that is something I'm, really in process with now, because it's, because, you can be criticized into submission, right? And I'm not about that. And so when you know who you are, if someone says something to you, if you can take that in as your truth, you can put it on your shoulder and think about it, or you can push it away and know that it's actually not about you and isn't you. But it's, you just keep going, you just keep going, and it's a thing. It's a thing.
Yeah,
And life isn't fair. And so, this is the world that we live in, and you just keep going.
yeah, we all need to be a little more unapologetic, and kind of really find yourself in the process, whether it's in your studies, in how you do your research papers, or how you start an idea and how you execute on it. Like, really find out who you are, like, and what you're good at, and really hone in on that. I feel like as a woman, it was so hard for me to build genuine, not in a douche way, confidence that serves me. It's so hard to really stand your ground and get rid of the imposter syndrome, which still pops up once in a while. But yeah, just like all the trees, all the flowers, they all look different, but they're all beautiful. So it's all okay. Like, we can all be unique.
And I'll just add that, I think what's been really interesting, so I turned 40 this year, I'll just like go ahead and say it. But it's been a transition period for me, because I think what makes you really successful in the younger years, it's like, it's a lot of individual performance and, working really hard. And like, for me, over the past few years, I have to change it. Like, it's a transition, and there aren't, guidebooks out there, but I think this whole kind of, transformation process and knowing who you are, I mean, that doesn't have to wait. You can do that now. And get great mentors. I've heard people mention mentors and coaches are super important, and get really good friends in business as well.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much for that advice. And it's definitely applicable, I feel like, to a student perspective now as well. So before we move into our final question, I just wanted to remind the audience that you are welcome to keep sending me your questions so I can call on you. And you are also, there'll be an opportunity for you to raise your hand as well if you have a really long question or something like that. But for our final question, I always ask a kind of cumulative question about our pillars of entrepreneurial thinking, which again are in the chat if you need to refer to them. But based on each of your own individual entrepreneurial journeys and founding stories, which one of our entrepreneurial thinking pillars do you want to work on leveraging more often? So I think we'll start with Kimton for this one.
So I read them earlier, and they were really hard to kind of, I mean, they're all fantastic. And I have such a high risk threshold. Tolerance for ambiguity is probably something that I'm, thinking about a lot. Jennifer mentioned it earlier, like between a structured and unstructured assignment, it's, I go back and forth. I'm an entrepreneur that likes to bring structure. And so, I don't know. I might have to jump in later to kind of piggyback on Jennifer and Pocket. This is a difficult one.
Yeah. Jennifer, do you have an answer for this?
Yeah, for me, yeah, I mean, again, I think some similar things like high tolerance for risk. But for me, once I've spent 13 years building this company, and I have been so heads down, like, you get really focused on one thing and you forget about the opportunity discovery piece, right? So you forget to look up and look around, and you've got your mission, and wait, maybe there's opportunities that are even related to that mission, but might help you expand. But sometimes you stop looking up and stop looking around. And I think that's what I would like to work on most, is just that continued opportunity discovery. Because a lot of times I have those ideas and I don't write them down, Kimton. I forget to write them down, and then I'm like, what was that idea? But yeah, that's where I would focus.
Great, awesome. Pocket, do you have an answer for in addition to this?
I think a lot of these are very similar. Like, I think failing wisely, improvisation, openness to risk, and tolerance for ambiguity are kind of all the same pillar for me. If like I recommend a book called Lean Startup Method. It was a module in my entrepreneurship classes. It's really helpful to understand like how to fail fast and how to just test a bunch of different things. So I feel like I do that pretty well. I would say, I guess for the next phase, I think I need to open myself up again to risks, because I feel like in investing and in fundraising, I have my comfort zone now. But I think there are also some moonshot opportunities out there. And I feel like I could reach those a bit more than I have.
Great, thank you. Kipton, do you want to add to that or no?
No, they did a fantastic job.
Okay, so then I guess we are in a really good place to move into our Q&A. So the first question that we have is, if you had one piece of advice for a graduating senior going into the corporate world, but is interested in eventually making it into the startup world, what would it be? And any of you can jump in for this.
Don't burn any bridges, and always keep your network going. I'll keep it short and sweet. Networking is huge. I'm in an industry where, even though it's a huge global industry, people know each other, and these clients talk to each other. And a lot of the people that I leveraged when we started Matrix are people that I had worked with in my first job, whatever it was, 12 years earlier, because it was within the same industry. So yeah, building out that network is huge. And yeah, not burning any bridges is a good one too, because you never know who's going to end up on the VC side of the table.
That's really good advice. I would, add to that. Think about going into a corporate strategy position. Strategy in large companies is often entrepreneurship. And so you're constantly launching new ideas, concepts, programs, and businesses within a company, and really focus on who you're reporting to, and like, just go find the most incredible leader that you can find. Detail those qualities that you're looking for in a leader, and in who you want to be in a leader, and go find that person and go work for them for a few years to learn.
I have a very short period in the corporate environment. I would say, I guess, shorten your corporate career and like go directly at what you're trying to do, like what you really want to do. So one thing I learned when I was in the entrepreneurship program for my master's was that all the successful entrepreneurs have already dropped out. So I was feeling left out by sitting in the classroom and still, waiting to graduate. So sometimes I think, especially women, we feel like we need to make some necessary steps to get to the destination. But I think the entrepreneurship mindset is about finding the shortest path. And sometimes the shortest path is the hardest. It's not the other way around. So, if you have the entrepreneurial urge, find a way to express it, whether it's, writing a blog, or, really dive into the world of startups by subscribing to some newsletters, listening to entrepreneurship podcasts, and, find these communities where you can get exposed to this kind of content, this kind of people, and this kind of network. And really always invest in yourself and start saving money for your future entrepreneurial ventures, because at first you might not be paid for a while. But really have fun doing whatever you're trying to do, because you're on your own timeline, and really don't. When I was at William & Mary, I was feeling like so left behind, because everyone was so prepared for the career fairs, for the Dog Street to Wall Street. I always felt that, I was not ready for it. Like, they're all dressed up, but it's all okay. Like, we have different paces, and just, go with your own pace. It's a very long game.
I'll also second pocket on the investing. Compound interest. Like, if y'all, just start with the retirement accounts and like double down.
Awesome. Yeah, I bet all the Finance Academy people in the room really felt your pain pocket when you mentioned dog to wall, but thank you all so much for this advice. Our next question is for Pocket, and they say, you described entrepreneurship as jumping into the ocean and then learning how to swim. What is the most productive way to learn to swim, or what did you find to be the most helpful?
I think, yeah, as I said, like whether it's by listening to things, watching things, reading things, or being part of a community, really expose yourself to the entrepreneur's mentality. It's kind of a distorted reality world where like a lot of things you've learned all your life are going to be proved wrong and you're going to, like kind of rebuild how you think about going at things. So I think you need to have that exposure as soon as possible. So I think Shark Tank, you can watch Shark Tank, you can subscribe to, the TechCrunch newsletter. You could subscribe to like the I Am SoGal newsletter, which is our newsletter, which is awesome. Attend these events and hear from founders themselves. Like there is some magic power in how entrepreneurs talk. It's really contagious and it really makes you feel that you could do anything. So yeah, I think getting acquainted to that, like in a few months, you might just open up, whole new ideas and inspirations, and it will just be so beneficial.
Great. So I think you might have time for one last question. And this person asks, are there any recommendations that you all have for entrepreneurial podcasts or other resources that you like?
So I OD'd on all of that stuff. Like I used to listen to like How I Built This and like, all the podcasts, I read all the books, I watched all the shows, and like I hit a certain point and I was like, I just want to be my own kind of flavor of entrepreneur. Like I'm sick of kind of like taking input from others. What I do, that is kind of different and interesting is like I read a lot of autobiographies of people who you wouldn't think that are entrepreneurs. Like Dolly Parton is a businesswoman. Like she is a serious businesswoman who's been incredibly successful. She's an artist as well. And so like, I like learning about people that have made themselves and haven't, been listening to all the podcasts and, listening to all the books, that are just kind of like, they've just done it. Like, so that isn't an answer really.
Yeah, I don't know that I have a ton of recommendations in that area either. I'm more of the learn from people directly kind of person. So I would say go to events and talk to people. I think one of the most interesting things that I've learned from other founders, and Pocket kind of talked about this a little bit, is just how many, typically they're not on their first company, right? And typically they failed once or twice or three times before they finally found something that worked. And so yeah, I'm more of a go meet them and go talk to them. I'm not a big podcast person.
Yeah, on Kipton's point, I think there are a lot of interdisciplinary things we can explore here. It doesn't have to be like business or entrepreneurship or startup or venture or investing. It actually could be, feminism or, anthropology, like really read about, what happened in the past is always more chaotic and more colorful than we were told. And I think feminism theories really gave me a lot of empowerment and a lot of just like awesome inspiration. I think this entrepreneurial spirit really shines in every sector, whatever role you're in. Like even if you're, I don't know, a farmer, you can do things in a very innovative and rebellious way. Like so I think inspiration could be drawn from a lot of places. But for podcasts, I recommend, there is one called Boss Babe. I think it's really fun and like casual, and it's good for young women. And let me see what else. There's also our peer Female Founders Fund. They run a pretty good podcast called The 2%. And then there was also the Girl Boss podcast. I think these are pretty good for like college students. They are easy to digest and just pretty chill instead of the more like businessy talks.
And I'll just add one more thing to that. It's like, think about Bill Gates and how he takes his reading vacations, and, you know, his interests are kind of like all over the place. When I think about like entrepreneurs, I don't know a lot of them who are like just listening to like other entrepreneurs. Like, you know, they're out kind of like, you know, doing their thing. And then, and just one other like quick thing, we have this, you know, myth that entrepreneurs are like these young people, and like people are like, oh, it's like Mark Zuckerberg. But I think the majority of like really successful entrepreneurs are people in their like 40s and 50s, even into their 60s, because they have had a ton of experience. So I don't know. Do y'all know that statistic? When I read it, it really kind of hit me. We have this like mythology of like these like superhero founders in their 20s, but I think getting some experience and learning who you are really important exercises too.
Yeah, that's just the Silicon Valley myth. And it like the what is it, crash and burn and like hustle every day is actually really not women friendly. So you can start anytime. Like, for example, a lot of people are like, oh, pregnant women can't be entrepreneurs. Like, that's total bullshit. Like, we have such a high concentration of pregnant women in our portfolio, and they perform so damn well. So there's nothing that could really stop you, and stereotypes and rules are meant to be broken. So yeah, really examine hard like the rules around you and break them.
Awesome. Great. Thank you guys so much for that advice. And thank you, Jennifer Pocket and Kimton, for so graciously dedicating your time with us today and for sharing your experience and your insight, just as not only women, but as students and entrepreneurs. I know I enjoyed it. And so I thank you so much for joining us today.